All right, thank you. Good morning, Title I coordinators. Thank you for joining us for our May Title I webinar. Let me get our slides pulled up. And I'm Erin Sutton. I'm the Title I Part A branch manager, and I'll let David introduce himself.
Hello, David Malanti, one of the assistant directors in the Division of School and Program Improvement.
All right. So as always, here's our housekeeping reminders. You can submit questions or comments a variety of ways. We'll have time for that at the end. Those of you joining us on Teams, if you want to put those in the chat, that's fine, or use the raise hand feature and we can have you come off mute at that time. Or you can send those to me via email at erin.sudduth@education.ky.gov. And of course, we always record these webinars and it will be posted to our Documents and Resources webpage soon after we finish, probably later today. And again, as you're joining us, just make sure that everybody's got their camera turned off and their microphone muted. This is just going to allow for all of the participants to be able to focus on our presentation today. If you weren't able to join us for last month's webinar, a re-recording of that is available on the Documents and Resources webpage, which does not contain a barking dog in the background. We talked about our usual announcements and reminders, our monthly spend down reminders, a look at the April Title I newsletter. And then our main focus was on parent and family engagement policy and compact. First, we quickly reviewed the requirements for those documents, as well as some common compliance issues that we see when we're out monitoring in relation to those. And then that all kind of culminated in a release and review of some new KDE resources to help make sure everybody's compliant there. And those are the parent family engagement policy templates. There's one for the district and one for elementary and one for secondary schools. There's also a template for the compact. You're not required to use those, but they can help you make sure that you're compliant. So if you missed that webinar, be sure to go and check out that recording. Okay. All right, there we go. I just have one announcement for you today. And if you've just joined, please be sure that you're on mute. Thank you. Our announcement is kind of a reminder about the virtual statewide federal programs training that is coming up next week. This is on June 3rd and 4th. Now it's the same content. It's offered both days, so you don't have to go to both. This is provided by the Brewman Group, which if you've been with us for a while, you've been to some of their trainings before, I'm sure. And we have a link to the online registration form on the slides that I sent you. For those of you not familiar, the Brewman Group is formerly known as Brustein and Manasevit. They're a legal firm that is nationally recognized for their federal grants management and education, regulatory, and legislative practice. Specifically, this training is going to highlight upcoming changes to uniform grant guidance, as well as some information about ESSER funding, fiscal requirements, et cetera. So we feel that this is really going to benefit district staff who are responsible for the oversight and administration of federal education programs and any sort of compliance with legal requirements for those programs. And we strongly encourage the superintendent, finance officer, and federal programs coordinator to attend. And you will be receiving ELA credit for participating if you're interested in that. So be sure to register. So we'll take a quick look at our timeline for making sure that you're on track to have at least 85% of 310K funds obligated by September 30th. So remember, these percentages aren't required in the law. It's just kind of a rough estimate of spending that 85% over a 15-month period. So by the end of May, roughly 62% should be obligated. That means spent or encumbered. So be sure you check that. Now, if you're significantly below that point, be sure that you meet with your finance officer and just make sure that you are still on track to meet the carryover requirement by September 30th. So for example, we know that salaries can't be encumbered. So those of you who are maybe paying a lot of staff with Title I, you might be below 62% at this point. But if you sit down with your finance officer and kind of project all of those staffing expenses between now and September, you can go ahead and confirm, yes, we're not going to need a carryover waiver, we're on track. It is okay if you've obligated more than what's on the table, but as I said, be sure to take some action if the amount you've obligated is significantly less. So what you might want to do in that scenario is consider increasing your monitoring of expenditures, check that more frequently, maybe have more conversations and check-ins with your finance officer. You may need to meet more regularly or communicate with building principals about their spending, things like that. And of course, Project 310K is not the only Title I project that's open. We've got 3 open projects, 310I, J, and K, and all of their associated deadlines are on the table here. So we'll just highlight the upcoming ones for 2024. First up is June 30th. That is 1 month away, so it'll be here before you know it. And that is the deadline to have all 310I funds obligated. Then the next deadline is August 30th. That's also related to 310I, and that's the deadline to have the final federal cash request submitted to KDE for those funds. Then on September 30th, we actually have 2 separate deadlines. The first one is to have all 310J funds obligated and at least 85% of 310K funds obligated, or if you're going to need a carryover waiver and you're eligible for that, you should have submitted it by that point. And then the last deadline for 2024 is November 15th, and the final federal cash request for 310J funds is due on that date. And like I said, all of these will be here before we know it, it feels like. So again, be sure that you're checking with your finance officer to make sure that you're on track to meet all of these different deadlines. I did send a lot of emails out this month regarding all open projects, so you may have gotten one or more of those. I sent individual emails to any district with any 310I or 310J funds remaining to be drawn down, and I mean any, even very small amounts, I let you know. And then I sent a bulk email to any districts who have drawn down less than 50% of 310K funds. So again, these were just reminder emails. You weren't required to respond or send me a munis or proof of anything. I did hear back from a number of you saying you were already aware, you have plans, or you're meeting with your finance officer. So thank you all for already being proactive on that. That was great to hear. Make sure that you've checked out the May Title I newsletter. Of course, we had an article about those new resources, the templates that I mentioned earlier, and an announcement about the Brewman Group training. We had an article about evaluating equitable services for effectiveness, so those services and programs at the private and home schools that you're serving. We also had an article on supplement, not supplant methodology, which can sometimes be confusing for people, so definitely check that out. Our new series, our Principals Perspective, that's articles designed specifically for Title I principals. That article is about capturing quality feedback. And remember, if you'd like your principals to be included in the subscriber list, you can either just let them know to reach out to me, or some of you have sent me a list with emails for all of the Title I building principals. I can easily add them to the subscriber list. And then we had our regular recurring articles for our open projects and our coordinators' year at a glance activities. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Jones from PCG to talk about the next opt-in period for Title I Next.
All right, thank you, and good morning, everyone. Good Thursday morning. My name is Jennifer Jones, and these are some of my teammates. I've been on several of these webinars, and I have also been working with the State Department as well as many schools throughout the state this school year, so I may look and sound familiar, but this is my team at PCG, and I am a senior consultant. If you haven't met me virtually before, I'm a senior consultant, which is just a fancy way of saying that I connect with school districts and the state departments really nationwide to provide resources, to provide professional development, and to provide all-around support. I am a former educator as well as a former school administrator, and I live just outside of Cleveland, Ohio, so north of you all, where it's still 40 degrees when we wake up in the morning. So we're hoping to get into the 70s and 80s really soon. Just a little bit about Public Consulting Group. If you haven't heard of us, our motto is Solutions That Matter. And that's really because we have been in the space of education really since the mid 80s. And we've been working in the public sector at the federal, state, and local level for that number of years. We provide support and solutions for over 6,000 school districts across the country, including we have a customized curriculum department, of course, helping the management of Title I and other grant programs. We have a large foothold when it comes to special education and case management. We provide direct student services, and then we also provide strategic planning and program reviews. More specifically, in your state of Kentucky, we have been providing school-based Medicaid support since about 2008. We've also been partnered with Jefferson County Public Schools for EdPlan, and as well as some other districts within Kentucky. So EdPlan may sound a bit familiar to you. We have also helped Jefferson as well as other school districts hire teachers, because we know that's always a challenge, especially post-COVID, hiring and retaining quality teachers. And then we also have a behavior tracker system, which is entitled BTA. And that's all about, supporting school districts as they are tracking and monitoring student behavior to prevent, anything further detrimental from happening to that student or the community. Now, as Aaron mentioned, we are in our third opt-in period for our Title I Next solution. And I, would just give a super round of applause to Aaron and David. We have been working side by side for this entire school year, as they have contracted with us for this year as well as next year to provide Title I Next, which is a document management solution that is at no cost to all Kentucky school districts. To share a bit more details, Title I Next is a cloud-based software solution. So it's in the cloud. It's nothing specific that you have to download. And it really exists to help support and streamline the administration of Title I programs. It provides a document management system as well as a district-wide compliance monitoring system for Title I federal programs, so that the central office as well, the State Department and then the central office and then individual schools can quickly disseminate, retrieve, evaluate, and approve an unlimited number of Title I department documents. So as Aaron, always shares with you all on these webinars and through email and through visits and all of that, all of the compliance documents that are very important so that you can, continue to, efficiently run Title I Next, as well as, support the schools. All of that documents are available within Title I Next. Just a few key features. There's an unlimited amount of storage. Users are able to provide access and approve a multiple number of documents at the same time. So it's just, a click. There are status reports and filtered data retrievals available within Title I Next. There is a compliance calendar because as I know from working in Title I schools, and as Aaron just shared, calendars and dates and due dates are extremely important. So there's a calendar there to help you monitor upcoming due dates. There are also monitoring alerts. So if the calendar isn't enough, there's an opportunity for you to receive alerts, email reminders, notifications. There is a file cabinet for administrators to go to and retrieve, documents, as well as a dashboard. So if you're just looking for the full level, high level view, that is provided as well. And we also have Monday through Friday help desk support, and then 24-hour, access or support, after the weekend. So I say that because, as you're, if you're interested in utilizing Title I Next and you want to make sure that should you hit a roadblock, there will be someone there to support you, a live help desk agent, and not just, a bot. We provide that as well. We also provide virtual training. So I'll talk in just a moment about the opt-in period. But once you opt in, we provide 1 hour on 2 different days. So you don't have to come for both days, but it's usually like a Tuesday or a Thursday. And we provide a live demo of the system. So you are fully supported as you're utilizing the system. In terms of next steps, we have been, again, and thanks to Aaron and David and Tara and others, we have been providing outreach through the Monday messages, the Commissioner's Monday messages, through these webinars, through the newsletter, through direct emails that have come from Aaron where there is an actual flyer. And then we've had 3, this is our 3rd opt-in period. So we had 1 in January, 1 in March, and our next one is coming up in June. And we're actually going to start on June 3rd, since that's a Monday. So I know we have the 6th here, but we're going to start on June 3rd. And therefore we have updated, and I'll just drop this in the chat. We've updated the QR code. So I'm sending that. So please use that particular QR code. If you use the old one, it's okay. We'll still get it. But we just updated it with this so that it comes back from June 3rd until June 14th, so that we have that full 2 weeks as you begin your summers. If you have any questions, I will also put an email just here in the chat should you have any questions, or you can send them to Aaron or David, because again, I meet with them frequently and enjoy their partnership.
All right, thank you, Jennifer.
All right, thank you so much.
I can send that updated QR code out to everybody in an email for those of you who aren't joining us on Teams afterwards.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot for the time.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I realized at some point I skipped over the agenda slide, but our main topic for today is going to be the foster care transportation agreement. And this is a common finding during both desk and consolidated monitoring for us. So I wanted to make sure we kind of go over this in detail. So this requirement is in section 1112 C5B of the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. And this requirement is for districts to collaborate with the local child welfare agency to develop and implement these written procedures that govern how transportation is going to be provided so that we maintain children and youth in foster care in their school of origin when it's been determined that it's in their best interest. These procedures are going to outline how this transportation will be provided, arranged, and funded for the duration of the student's time in foster care. And the summer break is really a great time to reach out and work with your child welfare agency to get this agreement in place before the 24-25 school year starts. Although we do not have a template that you can use when developing this agreement, we do have this very detailed guidance document that is linked on the slide, and it walks you through each required component. It's also got guiding questions that should be considered in developing the agreement. This guidance document was developed jointly by KDE and the Department of Community-Based Services, DCBS, and they're over all of the child welfare agencies. So it's the next best thing to a template. So let's look at what actually has to be included in this transportation agreement. These procedures need to ensure that children in foster care who need transportation to their school of origin promptly receive that. That needs to be provided in a cost-effective manner and in accordance with Section 475-4A of the Social Security Act. If there are any additional costs in providing this transportation to keep the students in their school of origin, then the district will provide transportation under the following situations. Maybe the child welfare agency agrees to reimburse the district for the cost of any transportation. Maybe the district agrees to pay for the cost of transportation, or maybe the two agencies agree to share the cost of transportation. So before we take a closer look at the rest of the contents, I want to address a bit of a misconception about this transportation agreement. These written procedures are not the same thing as the policies that your district should and probably does have in place regarding student transportation in general, enrolling foster children, things like that. first of all, those policies were not developed jointly with the Child Welfare Agency. And second of all, those policies state that the district will meet the various requirements, but they may not describe the specific steps that your unique individual district will take to do so. And so as you remember, that's kind of a common issue we see when we're talking about policies versus processes and procedures, not just for this particular document, but others as well. So you need to provide information about how transportation will be provided. So this is going to be a description of the step-by-step procedure that the district and the Child Welfare Agency will follow to promptly provide transportation for children and youth in foster care. So you want to make sure you're describing that outreach process. And I've pulled some of the guiding questions directly from that guidance document that was linked earlier. So consider who is going to be contacting whom. Is the Child Welfare Agency contacting the district when they find out about a new placement or a change in placement? Who needs to be involved and be at the table for the discussion about these transportation needs? Are there maybe any other child welfare agencies or even other districts who need to be involved if a placement has happened across another district's boundaries? What method of communication are you using? Are you emailing? Are you calling? Are you going to have a Zoom or a Teams meeting? Who's going to be consulted during this process? And how does best interest determination come into play when it relates to transportation? So it's important to remember that this agreement isn't focused solely on the children and youth who are being placed in foster care for the first time. There may also be scenarios in which a child is already in foster care and then they have a placement, their placement changes, and that can impact their transportation needs. Similarly, we aren't just talking about a child from another district being placed in a foster home within your district. A child's foster care placement may be in your same district, but maybe now they're in a different school attendance area, which again is going to impact their transportation needs. For the next part of the agreement, we need to consider all of the low-cost and no-cost transportation options that are available. It's important to make sure that transportation is cost-effective, and exploring all of these options is going to be key in that process. Remember that transportation should be provided at no cost to the student or the parent. So some things that you want to consider when you're making these determinations, of course, cost, the distance and the length of travel for the student, and then developmentally appropriate methods of transportation. For example, if there's public transportation available, we don't want to put a small child on that by themselves. That would not be appropriate for them. So some guiding questions to consider. What are the options available in your district? This is going to vary from district to district. One thing you could think about is pre-existing transportation routes, pre-existing bus routes, or maybe some bus stops that are very close to the new placement for the child. Consider the student's eligibility for special transportation as related to any services covered by IDEA. Possibly mileage reimbursement for the foster parents to bring the child to and from school. I mentioned public transportation a minute ago. And then maybe you have a district car or a district van that could be used for these purposes. For arranging transportation, again, we're describing the step-by-step procedure that the district and the Child Welfare Agency are going to follow to make sure that this transportation is arranged promptly. So who's going to ensure that transportation is in place? And if one of those low cost or no cost options will be used, who's responsible for arranging that? For example, who's going to communicate with the foster family if they'll be providing transportation and then being reimbursed? If you're using public transportation, who's going to ensure that the necessary safety protocols are in place for that child? Our guiding questions to help with this section are, well, I already said who will ensure transportation arrangements are in place. Consider the short-term transportation solution. So how many days do the two agencies have to work together to get something more permanent in place for the student? And which agency is going to be responsible for providing that transportation in the interim while that decision is being made? Think about any school activities beyond just the regular school day and classes, maybe clubs or sports or something that the student will need transportation for. You may want to consider any preschool students who are placed in foster care. And then what will be done if the child exits foster care before the end of the school year? Is the transportation going to continue till the end of that school year, for example? Next is funding transportation. You want to be sure that you consider and utilize all available funding sources. When you do that, you help make sure that any additional expenses do not become overly burdensome for either agency. The Child Welfare Agency may be able to utilize Title IV-E of the Social Security Act, and that can assist with transportation costs for children who are eligible. The district may reserve Title I Part A funds in the foster children set aside for this purpose. I do want to make a special note here. Homeless set aside funds may not be used for children in foster care. And that's because the definition of students experiencing homelessness does not include children and youth in foster care. So when you're working on this agreement, you want to make sure that you're not referencing homeless funds or McKinney-Vento eligibility, McKinney-Vento funds, things like that within your agreement. So your guiding questions are figuring out which agency will pay for the additional costs. If the cost is going to be split between the two agencies, how is that going to be done and what does that look like? And what are the steps that have been put in place for any sort of billing or reimbursement? You also need to have a dispute resolution section in this agreement. Of course, we want to make sure that we are exhausting all efforts, every possible effort to reach an agreement regarding how these costs will be funded, but sometimes we can't come to an agreement. So you need to ensure that your written agreement talks about how you will provide prompt transportation to the children in the event of a dispute. While that dispute is being sorted out, the child will still need transportation to the school. So some things to think about. Who's going to be responsible for notifying the superintendent and then the next line supervisor for the child welfare agency that there is a dispute? If the dispute is not resolved in a specific number of days, who's going to report that to DCBS? Then review and signature. Be sure to include language on your agreement that just states and verifies that this agreement has been reviewed and approved by both agencies. Then you're going to need signatures and a date for the signature for both the district and the child welfare agency. And when it comes to signing the agreement on behalf of the district, that needs to be done by the superintendent. You also want to make sure you include contact information for both agencies. So for the district, the foster care point of contact or foster care liaison is the more appropriate choice for the actual contact information. And of course, if your district requires that these types of documents receive school board approval, you'll want to make sure you include that and you have the date that the school board approved it. So kind of a high level summary before we wrap up, what the transportation agreement is and what the transportation agreement is not. So first, the transportation agreement is developed collaboratively with the child welfare agency. It's not up to one agency to develop the whole thing and then just get the other to sign it. Again, it's a description of specific steps taken by your district and the child welfare agency in your area. And it is also signed and dated by all the applicable parties. Now, the transportation agreement is not a blanket policy that just says, we will do this. We're going to need those specific steps in there. It is not generic or lacking in detail. As I mentioned a minute ago, it's not developed by just a single agency. And it's not a form that's completed for each individual student. Now, there may be a form that you use during the best interest determination meeting and all of the conversations surrounding transportation. But when we're looking at the agreement itself for monitoring to check for compliance, we're looking for the procedures that are used for all foster children, not a specific individual student. Right, so that wraps up our webinar today. So before we go, we're going to check for any questions. Again, you can put those in the chat or use the raise hand feature or send them via email. And so I'll check email. All right, I don't
Nothing
see
in the chat.
All right, and I don't see anything on email. So we'll still be here for another minute or two if you think of something. I also want to point out that our state foster care point of contact is Sharma Aiken, and Sharma is great at providing support in these agreements and helping you make sure that everything you need is in there. So you can find her contact information on our foster care webpage. Just go to KDE's webpage and type in foster care and it'll come right up. And of course, you can always send questions to your assigned Title I consultant. All right, be sure that you've got your calendar blocked off for next month's webinar. That's going to be on June 27th at 10 a.m. Eastern. And as a reminder, anytime you have feedback on these webinars or something you'd like to see more of, you can submit those either directly to me or your consultant. That's fine. If you prefer it being more anonymous, you can use our webinar feedback survey. So we have a link to the survey on the slide. We also always include that in the monthly newsletter. So thank you to everyone who submitted a response last month. We appreciate the positive feedback. I have noticed I'm getting more feedback since I started including the link on the slide, so that's great. And shout out to the person who teased me about my barking dog last month. That made me laugh. We did get one question last month that I wanted to address, and that was about the possibility of awarding ELA credit for these Title I monthly webinars. So these webinars are our way of providing technical assistance to you, and that's our responsibility as the state agency. We design these monthly webinars to be relatively short, typically 20 to 30 minutes. And because we broadcast through Teams and our media portal, we have no way of verifying everyone who attended, whether or not they stayed for the whole presentation, all of that. And that's why we don't offer ELA credit for these. We do offer ELA credit for our larger training sessions, such as that federal programs training provided by Brewman that I mentioned earlier. Let's see. Of course, I also said you can send any suggestions about these to me or your consultant. Remember, if you have a specific question about any of the content today, send that to me or your consultant. Don't put that in the survey because the survey is anonymous, so I won't know who to send a response to. Okay, I do see a question in the chat. Do we know when allocations will be determined? Whoops, sorry, it jumped. For Title I, II, and IV, or when equitable services will be due? We don't have any specific dates on that yet. Oh, and David's put a response in there. Our budget and finance team's working on allocations now. The equitable services packet will be uploaded to GMAP with the new applications, but as I just said, we don't have a specific date yet. Unfortunately, it kind of varies from year to year. All right, and I don't see any questions. I do see I've gotten one list of principal emails to add to the newsletter, so that's great. And thank you all for joining us. We will see you next month.